North of San Francisco, inside Point Reyes National Seashore, sits Drake's Estero, a wild water wonderland for birds, seals, and oysters. Also home to Drake's Bay Oyster Farm for 80 years. Many environmentalists see the farm as green, sustainable agriculture. But wilderness advocates say Congress has wanted to make Drake's Estero a full wilderness for 40 years. All that stood in the way is this commercial oyster business. Now its lease has run out.
One of the things that can take place in a wilderness is a commercial enterprise, a business.
We don't have another opportunity for a marine wilderness in the continental U.S. There are plenty of places that you can grow oysters.
Amy Meyer started the push in Congress back in the 1970s.
It's the idea of going someplace where the hand of man is not felt.
CBN News visited the oyster farm on a foggy day that was supposed to be its last harvesting oysters. Owner Kevin Lunny was there, worrying if his 30 workers' jobs would also soon disappear.
A lot of these people that have been here for 25 or 30 years are going to have to go start over somewhere.
Lunny bought the farm in 2004, believing the lease would be renewed in 2012, only to be told later by the government,
"Oh, by the way, we're not going to renew in 2012. And we said, "Say what?"
But then another blow. The National Park Service said it had research that showed the Drake's Bay Oyster Farm was doing real damage to the Estero, catastrophic harm.
Wilderness advocate Neil Desai calls that charge accurate.
There's significant ecological problems here.
The National Park Service findings put a guilt trip on Lunny.
Are we doing this to the environment? I actually believed him.
The only problem with this research? Well, it just wasn't true.
Asked to review it, National Academy of Sciences member Corey Goodman expressed shock at what he found.
The Park Service publicly would say this, and it winds up when you looked at the data, it would be that. It would be completely the opposite. In fact, in some cases, they were just simply making things up.
Our government should behave better than this.
That abuse of science was one of the main reasons lawyer Peter Prowse jumped to defend the oyster farm.
There would be claims made about harm to harbor seals, harm to eelgrass, harm from boat noise.
And none of those claims could be proved by actual research.
You can't just make up data. You can't just make up false claims.
Goodman believes it was all rigged for a purpose.
The Park Service has been like having blinders. They have been absolutely determined, we're going to get rid of this oyster farm, and we're going to show that Kevin Lunny is an environmental criminal.
Well, Desai says the oyster farm does do bad things. An example?
They're taking their motorboats into sensitive harbor seal protection areas, conducting illegal development.
Others say the oyster farm does much more good than harm. For instance, the Estero is surrounded by historical cattle farms, with the cows creating some of the waste flowing into it. Lunny and many experts say oysters can actually consume that waste. So customer Cindy French wonders why the oysters have to go while the cows stay.
They're doing a lot more damage than these guys are. And I can guarantee you this is some of the cleanest water out here. I've been eating these oysters for years, so.
Oyster fanatics showed up all during this day, expecting to enjoy their last serving of what some insist are the tastiest oysters in the world. French drove 2 hours.
This is all there is. There is no other oyster.
What many customers hadn't known was that a federal appeals court had just delayed the closure until May. So instead of a sad goodbye, they got to congratulate Lunny on his last-second reprieve and complain the government seems set on nothing less than the 80-year-old farm's destruction.
What the federal government is trying to do here is impose an artificial wilderness in the middle of a historic farming community.
Wilderness advocates disagree and insist letting the oyster farm survive could set a precedent that threatens the promise of truly wild lands in America.
When there's an effort by private industry to take that away from the public, from all the taxpayers, it's just simply a break of a promise. And that can happen elsewhere.
People are always pressing the edges of this.
Meyer has labeled Lunny's efforts to keep the oyster farm running selfish. But Lunny says he's borrowed so much money to improve the place, if he loses it, that will bankrupt his family and threaten others.
There's a chance that my parents will lose their home and my brother will lose their home because that's the collateral for that loan.
Not to mention what will happen to his 30 workers, many living in nearby homes set to be destroyed, just like the farm.
This is indeed a beautiful area, and it's understandable people want to preserve it, have it as a wilderness. But for that to be true, must all these people lose their jobs? Must man be cleared out of the area? Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Drake's Estero, California.